My mother-in-law left me off the family dinner reservation. She didn't know I owned the restaurant and her company too. It was supposed to be a celebration, our 5th wedding anniversary. I had spent the entire afternoon getting ready. Hair curled, makeup flawless. The navy silk dress Daniel once said made me look too expensive to touch. I even wore the heels that always blistered my toes just because he liked how tall I looked in them. But when I arrived at the restaurant, something fell off. I stepped through the glass doors, scanning the dining room for him. The maitre d' asked for the reservation name. Daniel Hartman, I told him, smiling politely. He frowned. I'm sorry, ma'am. There's no reservation under that name, I blinked. That's impossible. My husband and I have a dinner tonight, our anniversary. He tapped on the screen. There is a party of 8 under Hartman family. They've already arrived. But you're not listed. My heart stopped for a moment. I turned and saw them. Daniel. His mother Vivian, dressed head to toe in designer black. His sister Emily and her fiancé. A few cousins I'd seen at Christmas. They were laughing, clinking glasses, smiling. And there was no seat for me. Daniel looked up and saw me. For a second he froze. Then he looked away. I stood there stunned at the entrance like a stranger. Not one person waved me over. No one moved a chair. It was Emily who finally broke the silence. She raised a brow and smirked. Oh, Claire. We weren't sure you'd actually come. This dinner was kind of spontaneous. Spontaneous. On our anniversary. Vivian turned her head slowly, like she'd just noticed a fly on her tablecloth. Her voice was silky, poisonous. Didn't Daniel tell you this was meant to be just family? I forced a smile. I am family. Her lips curled. Of course, dear, you know what I mean. I didn't respond. Not yet. Because if I did, I'd either scream or cry. Instead, I looked at Daniel, my husband, my partner, the man I had sacrificed so much for. He stared down at his plate like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. And in that moment, something in me cracked. Not broke, cracked. Quietly, cleanly. Like the first splinter of glass before the whole pane shatters. Because this wasn't the first time. Vivian had always hated me. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I didn't come from a respectable family. Because my father was a mechanic and my mother cleaned offices at night. Because I didn't go to an Ivy League school or join the right country clubs. She never said it outright. No, that would be too honest for Vivian. She showed it in other ways, in how she called me resourceful instead of smart, in how she'd gift Daniel a Rolex for his birthday and hand me a scented candle with a polite smile, in how she always introduced me as Daniel's wife without ever using my name. And Daniel. He never defended me. He always said things like, she doesn't mean it, or it's not worth making a scene. So I swallowed it, every time, every dinner, every holiday, every passive-aggressive remark, like a little paper cut that never healed. But that night, on our anniversary, when he let me stand there humiliated and uninvited, that was the moment I realized something brutal and liberating. I was never invisible to them. I was just beneath them. And worse, Daniel agreed. He wasn't my shield. He was their accomplice. So I turned around, walked straight past the maitre d' and out into the cold October air. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood under the amber streetlight heels digging into the sidewalk, and I made a promise to myself. This was the last night I would ever beg to be seated at a table that didn't want me. They didn't know it yet, but the game had just changed. People always assume that when you marry into wealth, you win the lottery. Private chefs, weekend trips to the Hamptons, monogrammed bathrobes. But they never tell you the real price, the constant whisper that you don't belong. I met Daniel at a university networking event. He was charming, confident, and casually arrogant in a way I thought was just Harvard Polish. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had borrowed a friend's name tag just to sneak in. I didn't come from money. I came from ambition. That was all I had. But he noticed me. Or at least he pretended to. We went on 3 dates before he told me who his family was. The Hartmans were old money investment royalty on the East Coast. His grandfather owned half of what became downtown Boston. I remember the first time I met his mother, Vivian. She took one glance at my coat faux wool from a discount outlet and smiled like she smelled something unpleasant. So, Claire, what is it that you do again? I'm in operations. Hospitality management. How practical. That was our first conversation. Daniel laughed it off later. That's just how she is. She warms up eventually. She didn't. She never called me Claire. She always said the girl Daniel is seeing. At dinners, I was seated at the far end of the table across from the kids. At holidays, I was assigned helper duty in the kitchen, even though I was technically a guest. Emily, his sister, once joked, "It's nice you're used to service work. You blend in with the staff so well." I laughed, stiffly. Daniel didn't. He just sipped his wine and said nothing. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the polite venom, the effortless exclusion. And every time I tried to bring it up with Daniel, he'd say, "Why are you always looking for problems? They just need time. Don't make me choose between you and them." That one stung the most, because he never had to choose. He always chose them. He let his mother hand me her coat like I was the doorman. He let Emily roll her eyes at my career. He let his cousins joke about how I lucked into the Hartman name. And I let it happen, for years, because I thought love was about compromise. Because I thought if I worked hard enough, they'd eventually accept me. Because I thought Daniel was worth it. But deep down, I knew what I had become in their eyes, the maid who slept in the master bedroom. And the thing about being treated like a servant is eventually you start acting like one. I anticipated their needs. I kept my voice soft. I laughed at their jokes even when they were at my expense, and Daniel. He kept thanking me for being so patient, for making things easier, for understanding how complicated family can be. But love shouldn't feel like being tolerated. Marriage shouldn't feel like being the help. I remember one evening after a particularly humiliating charity gala, where Vivian introduced me as Daniel's +1 to the mayor's wife. I asked him, "Do you ever wonder why they treat me like I'm disposable, Claire?" He said, "Tired. You're being dramatic. They just have high standards." And that's when I realized, to Daniel, I was disposable too. He didn't marry me because he respected me. He married me because I was convenient. I was low maintenance, non-threatening, easy to mold, easier to ignore. I was supposed to be grateful, but I wasn't. Because under all that grace and silence and polite nodding, something inside me was changing. The woman they had spent years underestimating. She was starting to remember who she really was. And soon, they were going to remember too. The breaking point didn't come with a scream. It came in silence. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw Daniel drinking his protein shake while reading market forecasts on his tablet. I had just cleaned up after a dinner party his mother insisted I help host again. He didn't even look up when I passed him. And I realized I wasn't a partner in this marriage. I was staff with a ring on her finger. That same day, I found an old notebook I had buried in a storage box, my first business idea. I had written it years ago, back when I still believed I could build something of my own. A boutique hospitality brand focused on luxury experiences for underrepresented female entrepreneurs. The idea had heart, it had vision. It just didn't have timing or space to breathe. I looked at the faded cover and thought, why not now? They thought I was lucky just to sit at their table. What if I built one of my own? I started small, quiet. First, I created an LLC under my maiden name. Then I opened a business account Daniel didn't know existed. I used savings I'd squirreled away, birthday gifts, bonuses from part-time consulting, even returns from stocks I bought back in college. I researched quietly, mostly at night when the house was quiet. Daniel thought I was just binge-watching reality shows. He never asked. He never cared. During the day, I networked. Coffee with former classmates. Zoom calls with small investors. I even reached out to an old professor who had connections in the boutique hotel space. Every time I was excluded from another family event, I worked. Every time Vivian made a dig about how I must be bored at home, I refined my pitch deck. The irony, her comments fueled my ambition like caffeine. What started as an idea turned into a plan. What started as a plan turned into funding. 3 months later, I had a small office, a team of 3, and 2 signed contracts from high-end venues looking to rebrand. And still, I told no one. Daniel thought I was redecorating again. He even told his mother I had taken up a hobby. It's cute, she said. She needs something to keep her busy. Cute. They had no idea that the woman they dismissed as ornamental was quietly turning into an operator. What they saw was the Claire who hosted their brunches and smiled at their insults. What they didn't see was the Claire who just closed a deal with a celebrity chef in Manhattan. I wasn't looking for revenge. Not then. I was looking for air, for a space that belonged to me, for a world where I wasn't just tolerated, I was respected. And with every client, every contract, every strategic hire, I found a little more of that world. There's a certain magic that happens when no one is watching. You grow, you sharpen, you build. And because no one expects anything from you, you become unstoppable. One evening, Daniel came home early and saw a folder on the kitchen counter. It had a logo he didn't recognize. "What's this? Just something I'm working on," I replied, closing it calmly. He didn't ask more. He never did. And that's when I knew deep down he had never seen me as a threat. He saw me as decorative, as safe, someone who could be ignored without consequence. And that was his biggest mistake. Because while he was busy living in his father's shadow, I was quietly creating something that cast a shadow of its own. And soon, it would fall directly over everything they thought they owned. I wish I could tell you that the moment I stood up for myself was some dramatic explosion, but it wasn't. It was quiet, measured, sharp, like a blade sliding out of silk. The night Vivian decided to celebrate her 60th birthday in style at a 5-star rooftop venue in Midtown, I was invited, of course, but only after everyone else. The invitation came via group text with my name conveniently misspelled. Daniel said, "It's just her way, Claire. Don't take it personally." But I did. Because when someone repeatedly shoves you out of the frame, you start to wonder if you were ever in the picture to begin with. Still, I went. I wore a black satin dress and heels that said I wasn't afraid to be noticed anymore. I walked in 15 minutes late, not by accident. And just like always, they had started without me. Champagne flowed. Plates were half empty. The head table 10 seats arranged like royalty was full. I hovered nearby, waiting. Vivian looked up and locked eyes with me. Her smile was thin, her voice loud enough for half the room. "Oh, Claire, you came after all. I wasn't sure if you'd find something to wear." Someone at the table snickered. Emily looked down at her plate. I stayed silent, smiling. Unfortunately, Vivian added, "I think all the seats are taken. But I'm sure someone in catering can find you a chair." The laughter was louder this time. I turned to Daniel. My husband, my supposed partner. He shrugged. "Maybe just grab one from the bar. We didn't know you were coming for sure. Didn't know I was coming." It was my RSVP that confirmed the final guest count. I had proof. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the performance. The message. "You're not one of us. You never will be." My heart was pounding, but my voice when it came was calm. "Actually, I said I won't be needing a seat at your table." Vivian blinked, confused. "Excuse me," I stepped forward, facing her directly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Because I bought the building. The room froze. Dead silence, like someone had unplugged the music. She laughed once, short and high-pitched. "What are you talking about?" I turned to the event manager standing by the bar and raised my hand. "Would you mind confirming, please?" The woman Natalie stepped forward, nervously holding a clipboard. "Yes. Miss Claire Hartley is the registered majority shareholder of the parent company that owns this venue. As of 2 weeks ago." The sound of forks dropping onto plates was exquisite. Emily gasped. Vivian went pale. Daniel stared. "So no," I continued. "I don't need a seat at this table, because technically, it's all mine." The air felt electric. People turned. Phones subtly recorded. The tables around us were no longer eating, they were watching, judging. Vivian recovered quickly. She always did. "This is ridiculous. Just because you bought into a building doesn't mean anything." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't buy into it. I own it, fully, with controlling interest." She scoffed. "You're bluffing." I smiled. "Would you like to see the paperwork? Or maybe I should email the board and let them know how their guest of honor treats shareholders." Her mouth snapped shut. The entire table was dead silent. Even Daniel, usually the first to jump in with some placating excuse, just sat there blinking, like he was trying to understand the new world he'd just woken up in. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in that family power. Not because I yelled, not because I made a scene, because I did something they never expected. I stopped asking to be accepted, and I made myself impossible to ignore. You know, I said reaching for a glass of champagne, I used to think the worst thing was not being welcomed at your table. But now I realize the real tragedy was thinking I needed to be. I raised the glass to my lips, sipped slowly, and held Vivian's gaze. She looked down first, the audience silent, in awe, some probably still confused. But I didn't care, because that moment, standing tall, unapologetic, with my name on the title deed and their shame written across their faces, that moment was mine. And it was only the beginning. The fallout from that night didn't happen all at once. It trickled in awkward phone calls, half-hearted apologies, and one very quiet dinner with Daniel where he barely touched his food and avoided my eyes the entire time. "You embarrassed her," he said finally. Like I was the villain. "She humiliated me for 5 years," I replied, calm. "One moment of discomfort doesn't make us even." He didn't argue. He just stared at his wine, like it held the answers he didn't want to hear. For once, I didn't rush to fix things. I didn't ask for his understanding. Because I didn't need it anymore. I had tasted something much more satisfying than his approval respect. And I wanted more of it. The week after the party, I met with my legal team. Not Daniel's. Mine. "I want to move forward with the acquisition," I told them. All of it. Quietly. You see, Vivian's family business wasn't just investment portfolios and trust funds. It had legacy holdings, small, outdated properties under a single umbrella company. One of those properties, the boutique hospitality brand she bragged about starting in her 20s, Hartman House, a personal passion project she now barely managed. I had already done my homework. The chain was struggling, the board was frustrated, the brand was stagnant. They needed an exit. I offered it. 2 months later, through 2 shell companies and 1 merger disguised as a rebrand, I owned Hartman House. Every last one of them thought it had been absorbed by some faceless conglomerate. They had no idea it was me. Vivian actually sent me an email about it. Such a shame. The industry is losing its soul. I nearly laughed. She had no idea the woman she used to hand her coat to was now signing off on her company's quarterly budget. "Don't worry," I replied. "Sometimes new ownership is exactly what a brand needs." She didn't respond. Daniel started coming home later. When he was home, he was distracted, short-tempered. He asked vague questions like, "Have you been talking to anyone in real estate lately? Or did you ever meet that guy from Johnson Holdings?" I played dumb, smiled, changed the subject. He was starting to suspect something, but it wasn't suspicion that broke him. It was a board meeting. Daniel had been consulting with Hartman House for years, unofficially but proudly. He liked to think of himself as an advisor. Vivian liked to say he had vision. Mostly he gave suggestions no one asked for and expected them to be followed. When he walked into that meeting and saw me at the head of the table, not as a guest, not as a wife, but as the majority shareholder, I watched his entire face collapse. "Claire," he choked. "What the hell are you doing here?" I smiled politely. "I think the better question is, what are you doing here? You're not on the agenda." Vivian was already seated when I arrived. She hadn't recognized my name on the calendar invite. I used my maiden name for business. When I introduced myself formally, Claire Monroe, owner and lead partner of Monroe Capital Ventures, she dropped her pen. Literally. The room went silent. I started the meeting, reviewed the quarterly losses, proposed a new restructuring strategy, outlined how we would rebrand Hartman House from an outdated luxury relic to a progressive female-led experience brand. All while Vivian sat 3 seats away, completely still, lips pressed so tight they turned white. Daniel didn't speak once. He just stared at me like I'd grown horns, but I hadn't grown anything. I had always been this woman. They just never bothered to look close enough to see her. At the end of the meeting, I stood up, smoothed my blazer, and said, "Thank you all. I'll be in touch with implementation details. And as always, I appreciate your trust." As I walked out of that boardroom, I felt it. Not revenge, not triumph. Ownership of my time, my power, my voice, and now their legacy. But that wasn't the twist. No, the twist came later that night when Daniel followed me into the kitchen, eyes wide. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like." I looked him dead in the eyes. "What does it look like to you?" His voice was small. "Like you've been playing us this whole time." I set down my tea mug slowly. "No, Daniel, I wasn't playing you." Then I leaned in, my voice steady. "I was surviving you." And just like that, the balance of power tilted. He wasn't angry, he was afraid. It's funny, when you're silent, they call you weak. When you speak, they call you ungrateful. But when you win, they suddenly remember your name. After that board meeting, something shifted. Vivian started texting me. At first, it was awkward little messages. Lovely seeing you in action, dear. You handled yourself confidently. Perhaps we could catch up sometime. There's a wonderful new art exhibit in Soho. I didn't reply. Not right away. Then Emily messaged me on Instagram an emoji reaction to a story I posted at a client event. 2 days later, she invited me to brunch with the girls. The same girls who used to ask if I was one of the waitstaff. Now they were calling me boss lady, like it was a joke they hoped I'd let them be part of. Even Daniel changed. He started coming home earlier, bringing flowers, asking questions he hadn't bothered with in years. How's the firm? Is there anything you need from me? I was thinking about what you said. Maybe I haven't shown up for you. He'd sit next to me on the couch, quietly hopeful like proximity could erase years of silence. But it wasn't affection, it was strategy. Because for the first time in our marriage, he needed me more than I needed him. And I saw it in every nervous glance, every cautious sentence. Daniel was afraid I'd walk and take half his name with me. Vivian, though, she played a longer game. She invited me to dinner at her home. Just us. I went. I wanted to see what version of herself she'd bring to the table. She greeted me with a smile too wide to be real and poured me a glass of wine without asking what I liked as usual. Claire, she began. I'll admit, you surprised me. I sipped, said nothing. I underestimated you. That was wrong. And impressive. Is that your version of an apology? She gave a soft laugh. No, it's a pivot. Honest. I almost respected that. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice like she was letting me in on something. You have power now, Claire. That's undeniable. But power is fragile when it's isolated. There it was. You're here to offer me alliance. I'm offering you stability, she corrected. A real seat at the table, not just a stake in my old business, but something bigger. We're restructuring Hartman Global. We want you involved. Because you value my insight, she smiled again. Because you're unavoidable now. I looked down at my wine, then back at her. You taught me something, Vivian. She tilted her head. You taught me what power looks like. And more importantly, what fear looks like when power slips. Her smile twitched. So what do you say? She asked. Can we move forward? I let the question hang. Because she thought this was the end of the story, that I had arrived, that I'd finally been let inside. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't trying to enter the Hartman empire. I was about to dismantle it. That night after dinner, I went home and pulled out a stack of contracts. I had asked my lawyer to verify everything Daniel owned. Every company, every investment. He had put my name on nothing, not even our house. But when we traced the initial capital behind his first firm, the one that funded everything, we found something interesting. It wasn't his money, it was mine. Specifically the $500,000 loan I gave him before we got married. He had told me he'd pay me back once the company grew. He never did. He used it to start Hartman Strategies, then quietly diluted my name from every document. But my lawyer had found the original contract signed, notarized, and linked directly to his corporate filings. You realize, she said, that technically, you're the majority owner of everything he's built. And just like that, the narrative changed. Daniel didn't just marry me and ignore me. He built his empire on my money. And he never thought I'd notice. It was the kind of twist even I hadn't expected. And I couldn't wait to use it. Because the Hartmans didn't just owe me respect. They owed me everything, and I was finally ready to collect. The confrontation didn't happen in a dramatic courtroom or during a corporate standoff. It happened in our kitchen over cold takeout and 2 glasses of untouched red wine. Daniel had been fidgeting all night, folding his napkins, sighing loudly like I was supposed to ask what was wrong. Finally, he looked up and said, You've been talking to my board. I didn't blink. They've been talking to me. Behind my back, he asked. I tilted my head. You mean the company I funded? That back. He froze. You didn't fund it, he said. That was a loan. A gift. I stood up, walked to the drawer, pulled out a thin folder, and slid it across the counter. It was neither. You signed it. You used it. You built your entire firm on it. And now I own 51%. He stared at the document like it was written in another language. You can't be serious. I didn't flinch. I'm serious enough to have filed a motion this morning to freeze the firm's assets until we can clarify ownership. His laugh was sharp and desperate. You can't do this. It'll destroy the company. I poured out my wine. Then maybe you shouldn't have erased me from it. He stood eyes wild. Claire, we're married. We're supposed to be on the same side. I didn't raise my voice. You made sure we weren't. Every time you let them talk down to me, every time you said nothing, you built walls. I just finally stopped knocking. He softened. Let's talk this out. Maybe we can fix this. You mean salvage it. I mean us. I looked him in the eye. There is no us, Daniel. There's only what you took and what I'm reclaiming. He stared. You want a divorce? No. I want my life back. And if that means divorce, then yes. He slammed his hand on the counter. You think you can walk away with everything you think you'll get the house. The firm. I stepped closer. Daniel, sweetheart, you don't even own the firm. His mouth opened, but no words came out. You never read the contracts, did you? You never noticed I never signed away equity. Your name was only on the surface. I was the foundation the whole time. He exhaled. What do you want? That was the saddest part. He still thought I was angling for leverage. I want out. Clean, swift, legal. He slumped into the bar stool. You're serious. More than I've ever been. My mother will lose. Quietly or publicly. That's her choice. He looked up at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw it clearly. He wasn't angry or heartbroken. He was scared. Daniel had never seen me as someone who could walk away. He thought I was decoration, but now, I was demolition. I moved out that weekend, took only what I bought with my own money, left behind the designer things Vivian had gifted us like trophies, took my old notebooks, my contracts, my hard drives. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I didn't post some dramatic quote on Instagram, I just left. By Monday morning, the divorce papers were drafted, the financials were frozen, and the press, thanks to a well-timed anonymous tip, was asking how the investor wife behind Hartman Strategies suddenly appeared on ownership records. Vivian called me 5 times. I blocked her. Emily DM'd me some half apology that ended with, just please don't burn the whole family down. Too late. Daniel texted, can we talk? I typed back one sentence, you had years to talk. Then I blocked him too. There's a cost to power. You lose people who only liked you weak. You lose the illusion that you were ever really loved. But what you gain yourself. Fully, fiercely, finally. And for me, that was the only victory that mattered. A month later, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse. Yes, mine. Paid in full, held in my name, and purchased through the firm Daniel never realized I owned. The divorce had finalized that morning. My attorney handed me the papers over a champagne toast and a half smile. You're free, she said, and I was. The settlement wasn't a negotiation. Once my lawyers presented the contracts, Daniel folded like paper. He knew he didn't stand a chance. The press didn't help him either. The story made headlines in every financial blog worth reading. Wife behind the empire. How one woman funded and quietly owned a multi-million-dollar firm. The real Hartman investors demand transparency. After founder ousted in divorce fallout, Vivian tried to do damage control. She called me again from a different number this time. I answered out of sheer curiosity. You always planned this, didn't you? She hissed. No, I replied. Calm. I planned a life with your son. You're the ones who made me plan a life without him. You ruined everything. No, Vivian, I said, voice still like glass. I revealed it. And then for the second and last time, I blocked her. Because Vivian Sinclair Hartman was no longer my mother-in-law. She was just a woman who had bet against the wrong girl. That evening, I walked slowly through the penthouse. Each room held light and silence and space, the kind of space I had never had in that family. Not physical space, emotional space. Space to be heard, to exist fully, to be more than a polite smile and perfectly folded napkin at the end of a long table. I opened my laptop and checked my calendar. Investor calls, branding meetings, a feature piece for a women's leadership column. My name was on everything now. Not Daniel's, not Hartman's, just mine. And then as if on cue, my phone buzzed. Daniel, blocked. But I recognized the area code, the desperate energy. I let it ring. Then another message appeared, this time, an email. Subject, can we please just talk? From DanielaHartmanStrategies.com. Body, I don't know what to do without you. Everything is falling apart. I stared at it for a moment, not with pain, but with profound clarity. This is the man I begged for years to defend me, to treat me like a partner. Now he was still asking for help, still looking up from below. I typed 2 words, "Not anymore." Then I deleted the thread. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I was just done. You see, when a woman finally chooses herself, not for spite, not for show, but from truth, there's nothing more powerful. I didn't destroy them. They handed me the match. I just stopped putting out their fires. Now I wake up each morning with no one telling me to be less. I sit at tables I built. I run teams that respect me. I sign contracts with my name first. And when people ask me how I got here, I tell them the truth. They underestimated the quiet girl at the end of the table, and that was their final mistake. I didn't just walk away. I walked out owning the room they tried to lock me out of.